Previously on Mr. Homemaker.
We're not going to bury the lead.
Okay,
we're going to be right open and up front.
Good news, bad news.
So those of our longtime listeners will remember that at the very beginning of this podcast, we very quickly used the D word for our marriage. And today we've got another D word, which is discontinued. I have been discontinued from this podcast. I've been asked to cease and desist all engagement with the Mr. Homemaker podcast. And so we're here to talk about that today. We're not getting divorced. Great.
That's the good news.
Good news.
Yeah.
It's also good news that I think we're going on to the next evolution of the podcast. So
Yeah.
I'm actually super excited about where we're going.
On the marriage and family life and working from home front, if you could do one thing differently, if you go back and do a redo, go back 2 years, is there something you would have approached differently?
We would have a bigger house.
I didn't mean magically. I mean a decision you could have made. Not like if you could change one thing magically in your life. I'm saying, no, if you could go back 2 years, is there something you would be like, from the beginning we should have done this, or it was a mistake to do that?
I think this might not even be 2 years ago, but this would have been like before that. But I think I wouldn't have been so resistant of routine, because I think there is something very helpful in that, especially as you have kids that grow. And so, like, I am very much like, what do we feel like eating this week? What am I going to make for meals? What do we want to do this Saturday? And there's something that has become more and more comforting of like if you have like a Friday's pizza night, and we all know it's pizza and a movie, or because I was always worried. I was worried of two things. Like, one, I was worried of precluding ourselves or preventing ourselves from getting to do something fun, right? Like a friend says like, hey, let's go do this thing. And then the second thing was I had created this like image in my mind of you being very strict, like wanting very strict routines and not being willing to like go with the flow if it didn't go that way. So I was like really like I was too resistant of it. Whereas I think that would have been really helpful for us of like, you know, we do like we change the sheets on Saturdays, and that's, you know, I think that kids find greater comfort in like knowing what's going to happen. Like Saturday morning is park time. We always go out, we go to the park,
sure,
or whatever it may be. Yeah. So I think I would have like had more of that in our lives.
All right. Good.
What's yours? Would you go back and change something?
If I could go back, I would have done a lot more focus on. I was actually very related. It's like, but just maybe starting personally, not necessarily household, but both apply. Is like focusing on, like habit formation. This was just kind of like related to routines, right? But like, you know, I think we spent a lot of time early on focusing on our like aligning our vision. And we sort of dug through that to get it down to like talking about our like values and like what are we going to prioritize? What are our priorities? And we set goals together. I think all that was good. But I think that the missing element that I am just now starting to feel like, okay, I can start to see how like this is a cog in the machine that we like desperately needed all this time, was to specifically focus on like one habit at a time, like building healthier habits.
Right.
Whether it's like I probably have never, you know, at least not since we've been together, like I've never had as consistent to like I go to bed at this time, I get up at this time. These are the things I do in the morning to like get ready for the day. Like I have much more thoughtfully designed different portions of the day in such a way that they're like efficient and reliable, and like things, you know, I'm like moving the domino and knocking down the next domino. Yeah, and so as sort of a like foreshadowing, like, and we talked about this a little bit in one of our recent episodes about like the platinum circle, is like we spent a lot of time on the like 7 Habits talks about having a vision and a mission. We spent a lot of time on that together. Your Best Year Ever by Michael Hyatt talks a lot about like how to set good goals. But only like in the last couple months have we really sat down with James Clear's Atomic Habits and his approach of like, if you really want to consistently move the ball forward, don't spend so much time thinking about like what's over the horizon. Spend more time thinking about like, what do you do every day? Think about like, am I eating the way I want to eat? What do I need to change in my environment so I stop eating the things I don't want to eat and I eat more of the things I do want to eat?
Right.
Like, because it's nice to think about, I'd like to be healthier, and it's nice to set a goal of, I want to lose this much weight. But then you got to say, okay, what am I going to do today to move me closer to that? And what am I going to do consistently to consistently move closer to that goal?
Yeah.
So I really feel good about where we are in that now. I kind of wish we had been doing more of that, even with like the Martha Stewart stuff.
Yeah.
Because
we can always come back to Martha Stewart.
Yeah. I mean, we will circle back.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess if I had it to do over again, I would have done like either more holistically thought about not just like our vision and our goals, but then like really made sure we got down to the habit formation, the routines, that kind of stuff, our systems. And maybe even like, I don't know, it's one of those things where you could like go through all the permutations of like, which one should you spend the most time on? Which one should you do first? But yeah, I think introducing that kind of focus early on, I think we're saying similar or like overlapping things. Like you're talking about household routines and I'm talking about my own daily routine kind of stuff.
Well, and I think it's interesting for 2 reasons. One, I think you've got to like, you can't force it. Like, so find the book that's interesting to you at that time, right? Because like if you had been like, we're going to read Atomic Habits, like you were early on, and I was like, it's just like, I'm not there yet because we hadn't even defined like, what is it we want to do?
Sure.
Or maybe you see that book and you're like, oh man, I've been trying to like establish this habit. And so it's kind of like you can enter wherever you want in certain ways.
Sure.
And then, because I think it's more important that you're excited about it because it will resonate more and sink in more than if it's like, well, this is the prescribed way I have to do this thing.
Sure.
So, but I agree that like building those habits is important. And I think like, but setting the goals was important and really being into them because then it like changes the habits that we have. So for instance, right, I'm now a consistent gym goer.
I'm very impressed. You need to,
I just wanted to put that in there.
I'm going to give as much credit as possible. I have been very impressed at both your consistency and your intensity of your fitness regimen.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have gone from distancing yourself from like, I'm not an athlete, to like, now I feel like you're going to be running marathons before we know it.
Never.
No.
But but I think that it's like, so I started that habit and routine and you were super supportive of that. Like I have to be out of the house at 5:10. The coffee would be ready. And that was like for me early on, like when they say like, we could do a whole other session on this, but they say like, make the habit like, enjoyable or the activity, like I knew attractive.
Yeah.
I didn't want to get up and out of bed, but a couple things. Like one, my gym, once you sign up, you're like locked in and you have to pay $20 if you don't go to the session because somebody else could have taken that spot. And you can't like unclick it on your phone. Once you've clicked, you've clicked.
Yeah.
Then I was like, I knew the coffee was downstairs. I'm like, okay, like I can go downstairs and like I'll have a cup I'd put it in the mug, I'd go on the way. Yeah. And then, so like, but then that caused me I now go to bed earlier because I know I have to get up. And I drink less because I don't, because
we're not staying up till
11. Our drinking would be like at 9 or 10 o'clock. And but then I'm also like, I don't want to feel crappy. And so I have not yet gotten on the full healthy eating board. Like I still love sweets and that's a challenge for me, but that like those things will continue. Like they are cascading into other habits. Yeah.
It's a virtuous cycle instead of a vicious cycle. Yeah. You're doing great. I'm very impressed. I'm very proud of you. Okay. So all of this good experiences, lessons learned, a couple things we would, if we had it to do over again, we could do it even more or better. But what I'm not hearing us say for the record is we're not saying, so 2 years ago, we made the biggest mistake of our adult life and I stepped back from work and no one should try to, everyone should take this as a cautionary tale. Don't do this. We're not saying that.
I mean, I'm getting kicked off the podcast, so I don't know what that means, but no, I'm just kidding. The only thing, I mean, because I don't want to paint like a fully rosy picture, right? And like I said, there's a lot of things that were hard, and we have had a lot of challenging, like, husband and wife conversations, and we're not always very good at it. In fact, we just went through a marriage retreat because we really needed to learn how to communicate better despite all of this, right? Like, we communicate really well because there's a camera right there, and because that like gives pressure for like positive conversation. But like, we have gone through a lot of really like difficult, challenging conversations. I think the biggest thing that I have worried about through all of this is your personal satisfaction in not being in the workforce.
Yeah.
And so that's just something that I don't think we've cracked the code on it yet, because like part of what I've discovered is I can't try to assume your mind and like where you are, and assume that, but I'm taking who I have known you to be for the past 10 years, 15 years. And like I was worried that because you were and I both were very much defined by our careers and our belief in public service and all of those things.
Yeah.
So like I think there has been a challenge for me of like, are you happy? Are you enjoying? Like, are you feeling like this is a positive experience?
Right.
And like how to be supportive as you made that transition. And as we think about what comes next.
Yeah.
Because again, I think like inevitably, like when we did this was not intended to be like, this is our life choice forever. It was like, this is a phase of time where this is the right thing for us to do, and we will reevaluate what makes sense to do next.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of it was, maybe we should have said this more early on, but again, I'm sort of assuming that people who are listening to this isn't their first episode. Mm-hmm. But just to frame it, like, consciously, what was going through my mind when we decided to make it a podcast, not just for me to do it, but like we should really be like recording this and sharing it, is, it seemed obvious to both of us that there had to be other couples, particularly in the wake of COVID, people who experienced that as young families, were going through this was it was very jarring, and it caused a lot of people to reevaluate assumptions they had about work-life balance and where are we going to be and how are we going to juggle two careers. And so all of those things, it was just a matter of, hey, not everybody has the luxury of being able to go on sabbatical. Not everybody has the same options we had. And so it seemed obvious, like, well, we should be sharing this if only like for other people who are similarly situated now.
Right.
To think about it. Somewhere in, I guess it all started in season 2, somewhere in the middle of season 2, is I transitioned from thinking a lot about like us getting on the same page and like navigating our real-time stuff, more and more realizing like a lot of the things I felt like were challenges for us were challenges because we were solving problems today that we should have solved 5-10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's never too late to start like addressing issues. I'm not saying that, but it is a matter of saying, documenting in real time, like what we're going through in the hopes that will like help other people who are also in real time going through it, give them an additional like data point or like point of reference. What I perceived to be the value of that started to like be overshadowed by like things I wish I had known 10 years ago. Like conversations I wish you and I had 10 years ago, this kind of thing. Or like how I wish I had like understood better when we welcomed our first child. Like if I had understood then how I should be adjusting to that chapter of life and not like waiting until I realized like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't working at all. I should start like figuring out how to do this differently. Yeah. Things I wish I had known and things I wish I had been more proactive about early on, more and more became the like, how is it I got to be 30 and hadn't thought about that? Mm-hmm. Like there's some things that you don't like fully appreciate until you're in it. Like I get that, but I'm saying like, even just that concept that we touched on before about the difference between, it's not about trying to find equilibrium. It's not about trying to like establish like, I did it. Now I've achieved my desired routine, my daily, my weekly routine. Like this is my life now for the rest of my life. Like that's wrong-headed thinking.
Right.
And so just like I wish somebody had said to me when I was 30, hey man, here's how this actually works. Like the way your life is, you know, when your children are infants and toddlers is entirely different than the way it is when your children are, you know, 5 and over. Kind of, you know, that, and I mean, that's where we're at now, is like in the elementary years. Like, I'm sure it will be even more, you know, there'll be a different chapter yet again when they're in high school,
right?
Kind of stuff. But I do wish somebody had just sort of said, like, don't think about trying to like hold on to, oh, like, I want this to be part of my life forever. I was like, no. What do you want to be part of your life right now? Like when you have young children in the house. That's going to be different than how it was 5 years ago and how it will be in 5 years. There's 3 different questions.
Right.
So anyway, like that kind of framing became more and more dominant in my mind of like, that is where I think there's more value, is for us to help people in that situation. And so that has been like sort of percolating for a few months now. And I think, you know, has been a significant portion of like, I think it's time to take like reinvent the podcast. Because even this dialogue you and I are having right now, this like unscripted, retrospective, like sharing our experience and things we've learned, it would be hard for me as a listener at 30 to like navigate through this and like stick with it long enough to like derive for myself as the listener things that, I'm glad I thought, I'm thinking about that, or I'm glad they said that. Because it's not like what we're doing. This dialogue is not packaged to be appealing to, like address the needs or provide a solution to a problem or answer a question that I was asking at 30. I didn't know what I didn't know. That kind of problem. So all of that is like one whole line of things that has brought us to where we are today in the podcasting space. I think the other thing is, early on, I think it was really beneficial for us to podcast it was a good technique to keep us accountable to one another and to our viewers and listeners, was to say like, hey, we're going to have a weekly podcast. So like, that's going to keep us on the ball, moving them, like continuing our, like, what's our next step, you know, because we have to publish a podcast about it. And in the absence of that, it would have been easier to like kind of procrastinate or let other priorities sort of dominate and like not stay focused on what we had to do for improving our household operations and all that stuff. So early on, I really think it served that purpose very well. Over time, I think that value, that like return, diminished significantly. And in some cases, I felt like, hey, we're actually like more likely to have a conflict instead of just a discussion, because we're too preoccupied by like, there's a third party viewer or listener in on this conversation. So it changed the way some of our conversations went about household stuff or whatever, because we're like, well, I wouldn't want to say that in front of my friends, kind of thing. There's something else I was going to say about that.
I feel like I said everything in front of everybody, but
I think I held back quite a bit.
Yeah.
I don't know if you did or not. I think that you did, but I'm not going to speak for you. I'm not going to tell you that you did. But I feel like some of our conversations were a lot easier to have off air than they were on air. And I think some of that is just the subconscious, like, oh no, there's an audience. Yeah. It changes the way you speak or conduct yourself when you know that there's.
Yeah, but don't you think that was a positive? I feel like
early. I think it was. I think it's flipped at some point middle last year.
Got it.
So all of this is to say, not because of any conflict or tension between us. I think things are going great between us and continuing to improve.
I've never been fired from a job before, but this feels like you're like,
it's not you. You're doing great.
You are a great person. It's just
we're going to take this program in a different direction.
Yeah.
So this format isn't going to work anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, no, so the punchline to this segment is, the Mr. Homemaker podcast is about to be rebranded. If you're a longtime viewer or listener, if you're subscribed to this podcast, it will still be in your feed next week. But you're going to notice that everything about it's going to change. The title will be different. The logo or like the artwork will be different. Everything is about to change because we're going to rebrand this stream from Mr. Homemaker to Fit for Fatherhood with Mr. Homemaker.
Wow. How exciting. I never heard that until this moment, and it is amazing.
We definitely haven't been spitballing this for 3 weeks. 2 major changes. One major change is it's going to be our real-time lived experience, like as it's unfolding and in recent months and years, is going to become a backseat, it's going to be a backdrop, not the focus. The focus is going to be things you need to know when you're starting marriage and family life. And by you, I don't mean people generally, I mean specifically men. I'm specifically speaking as a man to men about masculinity, manhood, marriage, being a husband, being a father. For all of our audience, our friends and family, our mothers, aunts, cousins, sisters, I can't make you unsubscribe.
Right. But don't mess up my algorithm.
And I am after this episode, this feed will not acknowledge the women in the room. We have gone a lot of times.
All of us in our lives.
A lot of our conversations, we've been like, oh, well, let's think about how a husband might see this. Right. How might a wife see this? How might different people in different... We're going to strip a lot of that away. And the target audience, the person I am trying to serve is about to become very small.
Yeah.
And it fundamentally is very consciously and deliberately, I am trying to speak back through time to myself. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people who aren't anything like me, who will not find any value in this podcast going forward. Particularly if you're a woman. I think that's very quickly it's going to be real hard for women to be interested in my thoughts about how husbands should approach marriage. Yeah. I would be surprised if they found it interesting.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to reach them. I'm trying to reach a 10-year younger version of myself and things I wish I had been listening to when I first listened to podcasts, which honestly was about 10 years ago when I first got on the podcast bandwagon.
Yeah.
Hey, if I were you, here's how I would think about it. And here's what I would do to set myself up for success in my marriage and family life. If the shoe doesn't fit, if this doesn't apply to your situation, don't listen.
Yeah. And for those that don't find that appealing, you can listen to my podcast, which is called Being the Misses on Instagram. And it's just a bunch of snarky memes and things I find funny. So, and I'll only post once every 2 weeks because I barely have time to do any of that. So,
well, you stole my thunder a little bit. I wanted to put you on the spot while I had the tape rolling.
Yeah.
What will it take for me to talk you into getting your own podcast? Where you that kind of advice you were talking about that you give to younger versions of yourself, IRL, when you are mentoring women in the workplace about how to juggle their responsibilities as a wife and a mother and their career. I mean, that is also an audience that deserves to receive wisdom.
It's true.
I am not the right person to give that wisdom.
Yeah. Can I do it on a beach?
Can do it. Yeah.
I can just podcast from the beach. Yep, I'm in.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. So I think we should seriously consider that. I am putting you on the spot deliberately. I'm not asking you to commit to a publication schedule right now, but I think we have all the makings of you also having a podcast just for you. And that way, younger versions of us, maybe the wife discovers your podcast. She goes, oh, this woman I listen to, her husband also has, you should listen to him.
Right.
And vice versa. And I'll be like, hey, if your wife
wants to hear something completely different than what I'm saying.
That's right. You listen to my wife's podcast.
My wife. You guys can continue to just be separate. No, I think it's exciting. I think it's fun. We'll see how it goes. I would love to be a guest on your podcast from time to time. I'm reading a really good book right now that I'd like to share.
Yeah.
Maybe it's on my own.
Well, I do think that what I will occasionally have you back on for, I think there is space for men to hear from a woman. Yeah. Here's what was going on in my head when we were doing that, or here, because it will help men to, I think, develop like sort of break the mold, or like get them out of their own way of thinking and understand, like the way, and the thing I always think about is I did not appreciate at the time you were pregnant with our oldest how much different life was for you when you were pregnant versus like I was like, oh wow, we're expecting a baby, this is exciting, this is fun.
Yeah.
But the number of things going on in your world was dramatically different than the number of things going on in my world. And that is definitely an example of something that I wish somebody had been coaching me on. Like, it's not, you can't wait for it to be obvious what you should be thinking about and doing. Right. Because then you're behind the ball. Yeah. You're dragging behind. You're trying to play catch up. But it's difficult for a man, a first-time father, to understand that without somebody explaining, like, here's what it's like to be a woman when you find out you're pregnant.
Right.
And here's what I, as a woman who was pregnant, was experiencing, and what would have been nice of my deadbeat husband to be doing to help me through that period. That kind of thing.
You were a great sport, but yes, I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah. So I think that's an example of the kind of thing I think will be great to have you back.
Can't wait.
And just to be very clear, bringing you back on will not be a challenge at all, because we still live in the same house. We're still we're still married. This is not. I don't want anybody to read into this in any way. So I want to thank you for all of the time you've put into Mr. Homemaker. Your service is very appreciated. I'm Mr. Homemaker.
And I'm the Mrs.
Until next time,
happy homemaking.
Before we conclude this series finale, do you have any parting thoughts, words of wisdom?
Stay classy, San Diego. If you wake up tomorrow and there's a new mom in this chair, I tried my best. And that's all the news that's fit to print. And that's the way it is. I'm the Mrs. Good night. Good night and good luck.
All right. That was really good.
It was super.
All right. I love you.
I love you too.
We should have said that on there.
Yeah.